We got some breaking news out of the NBA. Suns have fired Frank Vogel after just one season in Phoenix. He led the Suns to the 6th seed in the West before being swept in the first round by the Timberwolves. Suns had the 3rd highest payroll in the league this year. Didn't translate into postseason success. Phoenix will now be hiring a 3rd coach in 3 years after Vogel's departure. Well, let's bring in John Gonzalez of the Beyond the Arc podcast. There's a great many ways we can go about this, John, but first and foremost, what's your reaction to the news?
Yeah, not surprising, although this isn't really an indictment of Frank Vogel and what he did. It's really that the Suns, it's not surprising because the Suns didn't have a whole lot of levers here that they could pull. As you mentioned, that they're the 3rd most expensive team in basketball when you factor in the payroll and the tax this season. But they're really limited in what they can do because of that, construction-wise, roster-wise. When the new CBA rules kick in this offseason, because they'll be in the second apron, it restricts them to signing minimum salary players. They can re-sign their own guys, which is why they extended Grayson Allen. They can re-sign Royce O'Neal. That's fine. But beyond that, can't trade Bradley Beal because he has a no-trade clause. For some reason, they let him come from Washington with that intact. You're not going to trade Devin Booker because Devin Booker is your best player in your franchise, face of your franchise. And then after that, it's KD. Do you really want to unplug KD after you went and traded all those draft picks and all that capital for him? So not a whole lot that they can do here. Somebody had to take the fall. Unfortunately for Frank Vogel, it's him, and now they're looking for a 3rd coach in 3 years.
They gave him a 5-year, $31 million deal last summer. And before we move on from Frank Vogel, much like the Suns have, how would you sort of characterize the job he did this past season?
It was fine. I mean, the roster was really, really limited. First of all, Bradley Beal, he was in and out of the lineup with different injuries. He hasn't really looked like himself. He played a little bit better towards the end of the regular season, but then he was inconsistent during the postseason, as the entire team was. So I didn't know what they were expecting Frank Vogel to do with this roster. I mean, they were incredibly thin. You saw what happened when Grayson Allen went out. It was all of a sudden the sky was falling because they didn't have enough shooting on the floor. And then all of a sudden you're asking Eric Gordon to step in and play those minutes. They shuffle the deck around. They throw Royce O'Neal into the starting lineup. None of it worked. It wasn't Frank Vogel's fault. He did the best he could.
We talked about the payroll. They have lack of draft capital and relatively new ownership. How attractive is this job right now?
Well, there's only 30 NBA head coaching jobs, so somebody's going to want the gig. But if I looked at it and said, oh, man, they are limited in what they can do to build this team and to fix the problems that they have. They had a whole bunch of problems this season. We could run through them up to and including the fact that they were dreadful in the 4th quarter. But then beyond that, what do you do to fix this team really if you're a head coach? And you see Matt Ishbia say, oh, you know, this is my guy, Frank Vogel. Of course, he's got my full confidence. And then all of a sudden, he boots him to the curb not long after that. Frank Vogel, you know, God bless him. He's got a 5-year contract. He can go off and put his feet in the sand. But Matt Ishbia is a guy who just last week said 26 other teams would want to change places with us and have our roster. Really? I think I would like to have some of whatever he's consuming because it sounds awfully fun, but he's losing his mind. So whoever takes this job is going to have to deal with an owner who is really out over his skis right now.
And lastly here, we're taking a look at the numbers. Again, none of it is flattering in terms of the price tag that comes with some of these superstars. But I would say, you know, is D-Book the only tradable chip piece to maybe fix this? I mean, if you were the GM, or you were James Jones, maybe you're Matt Ishbia, I mean, I'm putting him in his shoes here again. What would you do this offseason after hiring a new head coach?
Yeah, I think KD is your guy that you'd end up wanting to move. You can still get a lot from him, but you're not going to want to move Devin Booker because he is younger, he's healthy, he's the face of your franchise. You can't move Bradley Beal. That contract is literally untradeable because he's got a no-trade clause. And even if he didn't have a no-trade clause, who wants a couple more years of Bradley Beal at north of $50 million on their books? Probably nobody. I'm not sure why the Suns wanted it either. So, yeah, it would be KD. And it's a really hard decision to make because they traded so many assets to pry him away from the Nets. Matt Ishbia was a new owner at the time. He wanted to make a big splash. He made it, but it didn't end up working out. So, yeah, that's probably the last lever that you can pull here. Although my guess is they'll probably just run it back with a new coach and hope that the big 3, who weren't very big, end up producing because they didn't this season.
Okay, just a reminder, folks, they were favored in their series with the T-Wolves, and Minnesota ended up taking care of business quite easily. So it'll be interesting, again, the summer that Phoenix will have in front of it. John Gonzalez joining us here with the breaking news on CBS Sports HQ. John, certainly appreciate it. Part of the Beyond the Arc podcast. If you haven't checked out our newest podcast in our CBS Sports family, scan the QR code. It's John, it's Ashley Nicole Moss, and it's our NBA insider, Bill Ryder.